Welcome to the Numbers Game. I'm Jason and I'm joined by Nick and Marty. How are we going today, fellas?
Going well, thanks, Jason. Great to be back. It's going to be a big one today because the government's got their greedy little hands into the pots again, and Nick's going to be talking about that. So I'm all up and about for this one. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Marty, I'm well. Today being Monday, coming off a couple of weekends actually with no plans, which has been fantastic. We make plenty of plans as the weekend goes on, but it's nice just to cruise around. So feeling refreshed and feeling good. Jace, how are you? Looking quite rosy today. Get a bit of sun on the weekend, or?
Yeah, it was a sunny day yesterday, so decided to sit in the sun and get myself, just nice and baked. It was awesome. Greggy ran a triathlon, his first one, so a little shout out to Greggy. His little, I shouldn't say little triathlon. What do you call it? A sprint. So it was 750 swim, 20-kilometre bike and 5-kilometre run. And I think it was his first one ever, and he was within a minute of first place. So the guy just keeps on going from strength to strength in his fitness and training.
Awesome. That's good. Shout out to Greg.
Did get a bit of the bug for it though.
Mate, I'd say this very carefully. I did triathlons for a while, and they are a different group of people. And you cannot help but get addicted. So I saw what was happening and decided I need to get away. So, but anyway, Greg will go on his own journey, and no doubt he'll get addicted, and hopefully he doesn't fall into the vortex.
Well, boys, hang on. I know all this triathlon thing is fantastic, but let's just take a moment. I walked for more than 20 minutes on the weekend, which is the most I've done for the last 2 years because of my new robotic hip. So any prizes, any ribbons or something for me, or do I just go to 21 minutes and get on with it?
You got no room on the trophy cabinet, mate, so it's pointless.
Well, boys, I'm excited to talk about what we've got on today. After all this triathlon talk and walking and sun, it's been exciting times, but the government always kind of throws something back at us. But before we get stuck in, I believe this episode is sponsored by the great team at Future Advisory, keeping us going and getting towards that 100th episode, which will be coming up soon. If you do need any tax and advisory help, futureadvisory.com.au, the team there will be more than happy to get you sorted. Future Advisory obviously does a lot with superannuation, as does the Innovate team. So delighted to throw to you, Nick, to bring us the news of what the government have done with superannuation.
Thank you, Jason. It's not necessarily what they've done, but definitely what they are planning to do. And this has been I wouldn't say a concern, but always in the back of the mind that there's so much money in our superannuation environment. And when was the temptation to grab some of that money going to be too much for the government? And it's no secret we're at record deficits at the moment post the pandemic and giving money out to people. So the Anthony Albanese government has suggested or is introducing, as of July 2025, a 30% tax on Superfund balances over $3 million. So it's 2 years away. And most people look at that and say, well, over $3 million, that's a small percentage of the population. That's not going to impact me. And this is the narrative the government are talking about. It's only 80,000 Australians, which is 0.5% of the population, and basically, presenting it as we're just taking some more money off the wealthy. I'll just read a couple of things out, just some numbers, and then we'll have a bit of a talk about what the impact of this could be and why I think the impact is worse or going to be worse than what the government is portraying. So again, the government has stated it will impact 80,000 Australians. The Financial Services Council believes that number is actually 500,000 Australians, which is 6 times what the government has proposed. It's expected to add $2 billion in its first full year. So that will be, July 2025 to June 26. It's expected to add $2 billion to the tax revenue that comes in. The government is stating that super tax concessions, so the concessions that they give to people for contributing to super at the moment, amount to $50 billion a year in savings for people or the population. And they estimate that by 2050, that will outweigh the cost of the pension. So they're suggesting there's a problem here. The money that we put into the pension, by 2050, those super contributions or those super tax advantages will outweigh that, hence the problem. So you can see why they want to do it. They've got a massive deficit. There's this large sum of money just sitting there that the temptation has been too much for them to get their hands on it. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out, and again, we don't really know if this is going to come to fruition. Like, it could all change. This is what they're saying they would like to do. It might not actually happen. But the way that this has been, I guess, sold to the public by the government is that this is only taxing the wealthy and 0.5% of the population, or 80,000 people. What we need to think about is $3 million sounds like a lot of money for most people, but in 20 or 30 years' time, $3 million won't be a lot of money. And I'll give you some examples. And the main thing being, people that are my generation, I'm 40 years old, we've been paying we've been paying money into our super since we started working, unlike our parents who started maybe halfway through their working life. So it's not going to be uncommon for younger Australians to have $3 million in super in the future. And I've just got some examples for you here. A 25-year-old IT professional earning $100,000 with a current superannuation balance of $35,000 would reach $3 million by age 65. So that's just someone on $100,000, which is not a huge income these days. That's only 25 years old.
It's quite a small starting balance too.
It is a small starting balance, and that's pretty normal for correct. Just, compound interest. Marty talks about that all the time. You can't touch the money. So here's something that's probably more closer to my heart. A 45-year-old school principal, so that's me in 5 years, not a principal, but age-wise, earning $150,000 today. And again, $150,000 is not a huge income. There's people on construction sites earning that quite easily. With a current super balance of $650,000, they would also reach $3 million by the time they were 65 years old. So now you've got a 45-year-old that's also going to reach that $3 million cap. So don't think about this as being just the wealthy. Think about the future, and it might seem like the wealthy now. The other issue, and this is what the Financial Services Council is bringing up, is the government is stating they're not going to index this. So for the 25-year-old IT professional, by the time they hit 65, which is in 40 years' time, that cap will still be $3 million. So the Financial Services Council is pushing for the government to have that indexed, obviously indexed with inflation, because $3 million won't be the same value in the IT professional's case in 40 years' time. So that's another big issue. The other thing that I think is a problem is forget about the $3 million figure. Forget about the 30% tax rate. Forget about the fact that the original tax rate was 15%. What this does is it just gives a lack of confidence in the whole system. So people at the moment have been putting extra money into super because they get concessional contributions where they can save tax. The government's brought forward some rules where you can put some of your owner-occupied home sale proceeds into super. So people have been trying to get money into super to save tax. This play, no matter what the numbers are, just shows that the government are willing to go there if they need to. So it's 3 million, 30% now. What's to say in 2027 it won't be 35% at 2 million? And I'm just picking numbers here. But what this is going to do, it's going to make people think twice about contributing to super because the government has gone there. Speaking to some of our clients, particularly some of our older clients, there is a concern that the government could always tax super if they needed to. So this is them putting their hand up and saying, well, we're doing it and we're willing to do it. So what confidence does that give people in the future around making extra contributions? So I think it's more than the 3 million. It's more than the 30%, and it's not just the wealthy. This goes deeper than that. I want to unpack some other consequences, but might just pass to you guys to get your theory on it first.
Oh, well, for me, superannuation and your own home are the two greatest, benchmark stability factors in someone's life. And like you said, once they get proof of concept of them getting some good returns back on taxing the super at that higher end, then why wouldn't they go to the next level and the next level? And like you've aptly stated, Nick, people are going to be reaching these benchmark figures. But again, it just gripes me. It gripes me from the fact that, people are being given concessions to put money into super as something that's, tax effective for them, that builds their future. They do the right things. And then, the hooves are in the trough again. And I go, and like you said, it just takes away all confidence. I come back to my original point. If it was all taxed at 25% across the board, we wouldn't even have to worry, right? Super, business, personal, we just think about doing better. And I just don't like the sentiment of how can they get more money back to pay that deficit instead of having something holistic where everyone wins across the board. But that's my initial take. Wonderfully explained. Jace, any additions there?
Not so much. What we covered hits the nail on the head. The confidence of when you go to government, when you go to vote, and you put your vote into the little bucket on the voting day, you get your sausage and bread on the way out the door, if that's the main thing most people are going there for. But the confidence to go...
Or a hot dog.
God, don't go there, Marty.
No, I won't.
We lost so many listeners over you calling a sausage and bread a hot dog. There was a revolt. It was just,
I still think about that daily.
Sorry.
Yeah, it hurts. I don't even know how we can recover from this now, but I'll try. So, you come out, you eat your sausage and bread, not a bloody hot dog, and you're told we will not touch super. That's what the current Labor government said. They will not touch super. It won't be touched. And then a few months later, here we are with a 30% tax rate on a balance over $3 million. I think it's, as you said, Nick, it goes beyond just the 30% tax and the $3 million super. It's what's next. What are the other promises that can now be broken and undone? And then you've got the Greens coming out. I don't know if you saw this as well. One of the Greens came out and said, well, why stop at 3 million? Let's bring it down to 1.9 million. Anything above 1.9, we can tax at 30%. And that doubles the amount of people that this affects. And they go, hey, why wait until the 1st of July 2025? Let's bring it forward. Let's bring it forward and start recouping this money now to be able to start giving back to lower socioeconomic Australians and, more projects and everything else. But let's bring that money forward and fix the problem that we created years ago. So, it's I don't like it.
You cannot set up a mechanism for people to be encouraged for future prosperity and then just take a lick of it because it suits you, because you've mismanaged the whole budget and the whole fiscal system. It just does not sit well.
Yeah. And to your point, Marty, simplify it, 25%, because you keep on creating these complicated structures. People are going to do things to get around it. And Jace, who's a winner out of this? Well, it's going to be businesses like yours and mine, financial planners and accountants, where people come and say, well, what am I going to do now? So I want to put a couple of things to you about some impacts that, beyond the tax and people paying the tax, but what are some of the impacts that might be felt outside of that? So the first thing I thought about, well, where do people go now? So if super was a tax haven, and mind you, it still is at 30% compared to the top marginal tax rate, but what are some other areas that might be impacted? The first thing I thought about was the owner-occupied home. So it's the one thing that's sacrosanct at the moment that you do not pay tax on, capital gains tax or ongoing tax, but who knows, that could change. So I thought, well, wealthier people, what are they going to do? They're going to buy bigger houses, which means that top end of the market is going to get more expensive. So that's that. But then I went deeper and I thought about what I mentioned earlier. That's not really just the wealthy. This is people thinking about the future and the fact that, geez, I'm only 30 years old or 35. I could get to 3 million. Maybe I won't put the money into super. Maybe I'll buy a bigger house, or maybe I'll buy a better house. So what does that do for housing affordability? Because now there's one safe avenue left, and that's your own occupied house. So it could have a negative impact on housing affordability, particularly at that family home level or that level where people are spending, 1.5 to 3 mil, because these are the same people that are going to have 3 mil in their super one day. This is one for you, Marty, does it force wealthier people to pour money back into companies? Companies have a tax rate of 25%. They can build their wealth through companies, and then they can get distributions from companies, and then they can start to manipulate what they do with the money versus in the super fund. So people might start to come back into companies and say, well, I'd rather build the company at 25% tax rate and build my wealth that way. So that's a question for you, Marty.
Passive income company will still be 30%. But yeah, you're right though. There's still no benefit to putting into super if you can throw it in your own company where you've got your own control without the regulation of a super fund. I think that's the thing. It's like all the regulatory costs of having either a self-managed super fund or throwing it into an industry fund or another managed type of super fund where you've got all the fees that are taken for managing it and investing it and everything else. If you've got your own company without regulation and the same tax rate, yeah, why would you do it? So completely agree.
And the very thing they're trying to achieve, they're being very ignorant here, because people that know how to play this game look at the rules, they play within the parameters, and they take the best options. They're not going to give that money to the government. They're going to find other avenues to create more wealth and create more strategy and utilise advisors, like you said previously. It just makes total sense. So this is the thing. You go, yep, you could change the rules, but it's just going to shape shift where the money's going.
Yep.
And there'll be new ways to create wealth on assets, like through companies, like you suggested. Don't think for a minute you're just taking a bit of cream off the top. People will reshape their whole strategy, and rightly so, because like Kerry Packer said, the government's not using the money wisely enough to have that bigger deficit that they're going to utilise it successfully in the future. So why wouldn't you critically think about it and repurpose that money in a healthy, productive way? You'll do more for the community by doing that, creating more jobs, and it's they just don't get it.
So that Kerry Packer clip came up on my feed last night, and I reckon it was because I was researching this stuff. I've seen it 1,000 times, but every time I watch it, I just laugh. Anyone that doesn't minimise their tax needs their head read, because you guys aren't doing anything with aren't spending it in a good way. Something else, and Jace, this is probably more a question for you, just around SMSFs and paying tax, but I found this an interesting stat. So there are more than 1 million self-managed super funds in Australia, with around 76 billion invested in commercial properties and 42 billion in residential property. So this goes against what I just said, but again, I'm just trying to work out what the impacts are going to be here. But one of the things that a lot of people won't know is that if you have a self-managed super fund, you're actually taxed on unrealised gains. Is that correct? So picture this. So you've got and I'm just picking easy numbers here, but you've got a commercial asset or property in your super fund that's worth $2 million. That then goes from 2 million. Let's say it's a property that's been rezoned, or the government comes out and says it's they want to put some sort of residential property there. So the value goes from 2 million to 2.4 million in a year. That's not crazy. At a 30% tax rate on that 400,000 gain, Jace, you're the numbers man, is 120,000.
I was reading show notes, but yes,
so
correct.
where does that money come from? So that is now double what the tax would have been prior. So these bigger super funds with that are holding a lot of property that gets revalued on an annual basis, that goes up in value, they then have to pay that tax, whether they've realised that gain or not. It's purely just based on the valuation. So you could have these SMSFs or super funds that need to sell down property purely to meet their tax obligations and get some liquidity back into the fund now that it's 30%, not 15%. So going against my first argument around the property market, but does it cause properties to come back onto the market because these investors now need to free up liquidity because the tax rate is now 30%, not 15%. So just thinking about some flow-on effects that this might have, particularly at the top end of the market, and looking at really high-valued commercial properties that could have some significant tax consequences and liquidity issues within these funds. So
100%. When you do the maths on 1 million super funds, but 76 billion in commercial properties, that's pretty significant amount.
Yep, crazy.
This is what really annoys me. Again, I go, why are they putting those properties in the self-managed super fund? Because of the tax effectiveness of the structure. Otherwise, they wouldn't put it in there. They keep it as an available asset. They can continue to leverage into the future because it just wouldn't make sense. So you can't put your hand out and then bite it. It just again, it's ridiculous.
Yep.
I'm on my high horse here.
You're on your high horse.
But just annoys the living daylights out of me.
It's definitely going to – I can already see the conversations coming now. A lot of the time we'll have tradies come to us that want to buy their commercial property, and a lot of the time they'll say, my mate did it in their super fund. I want to do the same thing. You know, smart investment choice. If they can't access the money personally, but they've got money in the super fund, makes it all work. Obviously need to see a financial advisor for a statement of advice to make sure that's the right thing for you to do. But, you know, a lot of the times it works out and they can make it happen. But now I can imagine the talk at the barbecues going, nah, I'm just going to do it in my own name. Why would I want to put it into super for the government to take 30% of my earnings? Like, you know, it's just going to end up with the wrong result.
Yeah, and look, the reality is, inside or outside of super, you're still paying tax, right? So let's not forget that. But you just have far more options when it's not inside the super environment. And just what really bugs me is that just the big push the last few years to get money in, and then something like this, it's, you know, you just think, really, like we're trying to.
Cheeky.
Yeah, we're trying to put money away for our future, so that we don't rely on the government pension, and then things like this happen. And I just really don't like the push towards we're taxing the wealthy. Well, that's not the case at all. And most of the industry bodies that I'm involved with, the financial planning ones, have all come out this morning and said, don't keep mentioning the wealthy, because fast forward 20 years and you're going to need 3 million in your super just to survive. So the way that inflation,
that 25-year-old IT example was perfect.
Correct.
25-year-old IT professional.
Correct.
By the time they're 65, 3 million is not going to be an absurd amount of money.
Yep.
You know, so spot on.
So anyway.
And the business, the conversation, like I had a conversation with a commercial client, business client, couple of weeks ago, looking to buy their own premise again. And that was one of the points of the discussion. They're going, should I put it in my self-managed super fund? Now, it's a viable option given the way the system's set up. But the question I said, do you want to lock away that asset and put it in the hands of some, you know, a system that we're not quite sure how it's going to end up, or do we want to keep it as an available asset and back what you've been able to build in your business to be able to leverage that into the future? And I said, just answer that question before you make a decision to go one way or the other, because, you know, it could be locked away and they can't do anything with it. So it's and then they're hemorrhaging on the back end because, you know, things change. So it's it's. I just come back. I just don't know what's wrong with my 25% idea across the board. The wealthy will make more money and will use advisors to strategize to progress, and that money will go back into the system to help the less fortunate, you know, and support them. I just can't understand how that simple philosophy can't be engaged. Yeah, please put it out there. I'll vote for you.
Well, Mr. Albanese, if you're listening, Marty's offered. He's got the whole tax system written on a post-it note. That's all that is needed. You can implement that and go on to bigger and better things, and make our country a better place.
I've got to go there again just before we wrap up though, and just go. The super fund, tax on super funds is such a small area of the total revenue that the government gets from different taxes. So the biggest one is individuals. So 270, the number's ridiculous, but 270 billion comes from individuals, 16 billion comes from super funds. So like the fact that they've gone into this super fund area and are going to make, you know, go against this promise, I'm still waiting for the government that has the balls to change GST. It's been 10% since 2000.
I'll tell you what's coming next.
What's that?
This is after Elon gets thrown into jail. The next thing will be a tax on your own occupied home. That is 100% coming. So they introduced the windfall tax for developers. So, you know, if you're a farmer that bought a plot of land to farm 30 years ago because that's what you did. You're a farmer, and the government has rezoned that land. So you've worked that land for 20 years. You've paid it off. You've done what you've done. The government changes says that is going to be a residential area, which has happened to a lot of people. There's now a windfall tax that you need to pay. So if your farm goes from a value of $2 million to $20 million, you don't just take that $18 million. The government takes some of that back as a windfall tax because they've made the decision to make that residential. So, owner-occupied house, I think, is around the corner. Maybe not around the corner, maybe down the freeway a little bit, but it's that'll be the next thing. I can see that happening for sure.
Is the US, are they taxed on their owner-occupied? I think the US are, aren't they?
I think they are because they get to claim tax deductions for their interest repayments on their home loan.
Yep.
So I think if you're paying tax, then you've got to be able to claim the expense on the way through as well. So
probably state-driven, I would have thought, over there.
Okay.
Between state, federal, local, there's taxes out the wazoo there. It's quite a complicated area. But
just go to Texas.
Yes, I've seen... Yeah, just go to Texas. There you go. But yeah, there's definitely claiming interest on your home loan for your main residence. So I think, they're paying taxes when they sell as well.
So anyway, that's my rant. Thanks for listening.
I like it, Nico. No,
it's a good rant.
You've enlightened our listeners onto, your thoughts on the government and beyond just what it means for 30% tax on super. So thank you for sharing, Nico.
No worries.
Thank you, Nick. Game over.